the crisis in Ukraine, which is set to declare a state of emergency. President Biden and U.S. allies imposed new sanctions against Russia after Vladimir Putin ordered troops to eastern Ukraine. So Bradley Blackburn is following all of this from the UN headquarters in New York City. Bradley, bring us up to speed because I know a number of things have happened in the last 24 hours.
That's right, Anne-Marie. You know, Russia calls its troops on the ground in eastern Ukraine right now peacekeeping forces. But yesterday here at the United Nations, the Secretary General called that a perversion of the idea of peacekeeping. He is one of many world leaders who are now criticizing Russia for creating an international crisis.
The U.S. and its allies have started to roll out sanctions against Russia for sending troops into eastern Ukraine, a move President Biden called the start of a broader offensive.
To put it simply, Russia just announced that it is carving out a big chunk of Ukraine.
The sanctions announced Tuesday target 2 Russian state banks and several individuals linked to the Kremlin. The president described the penalties as a first tranche and said more could follow.
If Russia goes further with this invasion, we stand prepared to go further as with sanctions.
Russian leader Vladimir Putin showed no sign of backing down. Yesterday, he defended his decision to recognize 2 separatist areas as independent states and said Moscow now has an obligation to defend them. Satellite images showed new Russian military deployments to the region.
Today, here at the United Nations, the General Assembly is set to meet, and the deteriorating situation in Ukraine will be the focus of the conversation.
It is high time to return to the path of dialogue and negotiations.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken canceled Thursday's sit-down with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. The White House says it's still open to talks.
We're never going to completely close the door to diplomacy, and I don't think the Secretary of State did that either. But just to build on what he just said, diplomacy can't succeed unless Russia changes course.
U.S. officials say President Putin and the Kremlin don't appear to be looking to engage in serious discussions.
The number of countries sanctioning Russia continues to grow. This morning, Japan and Australia were added to the list. And besides economic measures, President Biden has also ordered more American troops, fighter jets, and other military resources into Eastern Europe to back up NATO countries that border Russia. Anne-Marie.
So, Bradley, do we know anything more about the further sanctions that President Biden said he's prepared to implement?
Right. This first round of sanctions really targets Russian banks and cuts them off from the Western financial system. But there are other steps that the administration could take to further isolate Russia financially. But another big tool that the administration possibly has is an export ban on Russia that would prevent them from accessing American technology. So they wouldn't be able to get some of those high-tech components that are important for Russia's private businesses and also the Russian military.
And then we know that the United Nations is going to be holding a General Assembly meeting today. Anything more about that?
Well, earlier this week, there was an emergency meeting of the Security Council. The meeting today is the General Assembly. That is the big meeting where all of the member states from the United Nations are represented. Certainly, Russia will probably use that as an opportunity to make their case about these 2 separatist regions and argue for what they've done in eastern Ukraine. But what foreign policy experts say we should be watching for is how China possibly responds to Russia's argument. Anne-Marie.
Yeah, that'll be a big one. And so far, the response has not been overly enthusiastic. Not overly critical, but not overly enthusiastic either. Bradley, thank you very much.